What's up YouTube, Capital G here, talking about summon limit in this video and asking the question, do you guys think that this card has the potential to become the next big devastating floodgate in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh? And if you're not familiar with this card, because it is really old, this is actually like from GX, it says, neither player can summon more than 2 times per turn. Negated summons count towards this limit. Negated cards / effects that would summon do not count. So this is an interesting card because it still lets your opponent kind of do whatever they want, but it puts a heavy restriction on how far off they can actually go. And I would just like to preface this video by saying I am not talking about an immediate impact right this second. I feel like floodgates in general they're just at kind of this point where they're all kind of in a crisis, because I think that Zodiac Trident kind of threatens the playability of all floodgates not named maybe Skill Drain or the Monarch's Erupt, because that card is just so powerful, and it is basically a built-in out for the most popular, most dominant, and most played deck in Yu-Gi-Oh! And the card just is kind of an easy out to all the macrocosmoses and dimensional fissures, and even things like lose one turn that would temporarily stop Trident. Trident can just say, hey, oh, it's your opponent's turn, all right, I'll just go ahead and pop you. So I feel like floodgates right now are kind of at an all-time low outside of Anti-Spell Fragrance and Imperial Order because of Trident's existence in the game. But with that said, I think most people expect Trident to be gone on our next ban list like it is in the OCG. So this card definitely could become very relevant. And not only does it obviously slow your opponent down, but I think the really big thing that it does is a lot of times it keeps your opponent out of their extra deck, and it stops what I like to call those 1 + 2 = 3 summons. And for those of you guys who don't understand that terminology, understand this. First off, that's just something I made up on the spot, but secondly, it's essentially anything like a synchro summon or your practical basic Xyz summon, not counting Zodiac because obviously they kind of reinvented how, you know, they were going to Xyz summon and whatnot, or even a link summon that is a link monster higher than 2. It's basically taking monster A on the field, taking monster B on the field, and then combining those, and then brand new monster comes out of the extra deck, and that is your synchro, your link monster, or your Xyz monster. And the thing that summon limit does is it makes your opponent stop at the materials. Your opponent normal summons that first monster, then they normal summon, let's say, a tuner, they got the non-tuner on the field, but that's their 2 summons. They can't do anything else. And an important thing to note about this card is it counts summons before the card is actually activated. So if your opponent is playing a deck like Yosenju and they go Yosenju, 1, and then they go Yosenju, 2, and you flip this over or you chain this to the Yosenju, 2's ability, they will not be able to summon any more cards. And oddly enough, that can actually make this card potentially a 1-for-1 if your opponent is doing something where, you know, they're summoned twice earlier in the turn and then they activate Soul Charge or they activate something like Invocation. If you chain this, that card is basically just going to fizzle. And I think that's really important because everybody is talking about how broken Brilliant Fusion is going to be and how it's going to get banned. This card shits on Brilliant Fusion. You know, all those decks that like to take advantage of getting extra normal summons, like a deck like Yosenju, or like you get from the Seraphonite that is summoned from the Brilliant Fusion. Usually you're thinking, oh, I'm going to get my extra normal summon, I've got a Seraphonite on the field that I can do. Okay, well, your opponent normal summons, they activate that Brilliant Fusion, you go ahead, flip this over. Okay, well, your second normal summon is now not going to happen. In addition to that, you have a pretty shitty field because a lot of times that normal summon and that Seraphonite, like, what are you doing with those monsters? You can't summon anything else for the rest of the turn. Like, imagine how play disrupting that can be against a deck like Invoked Wind Witch, where your opponent might open with that copy of Glass Bell, right? Okay, so they get the Glass Bell, they get maybe, or excuse me, they get the Ice Bell, special summon it, they get the Glass Bell for their deck, you flip over summon limit. Okay, well, now you're getting that Ice Bell, but you can't summon, is it Ice or Snow? Whichever one is the level 1 tuner. You can't summon that. You can't do any of your invoke plays. You can't use Invocation. You can't even normal summon Alistair to get a potential copy of Invocation if you don't have it. Your turn is essentially over, and your field is just a busted piece of garbage. Your field is just a couple of Wind Witches that don't do anything. Same basic situation for the Brilliant Fusion, and I don't know, I really like this card, especially if you're playing a deck that doesn't have to summon all of that much. Think about if you were playing against a deck that just has to be able to synchro to beat you, a deck like Psyframes, this card would completely shut them down if they didn't have Overload to out it, because Psyframes work where obviously you summon your Beta or your Delta or whatever Gamma crap from your hand, and then you get your driver, and then obviously you want to synchro summon using the effect of Psyframe Circuit, but the synchro summon can never actually happen. You get your driver and you get the other monster on the field, there's your 2 summons. You cannot progress your game state. You can never actually get a monster on the field. I guess the most you could do at that point that Psyframes would be able to do is, you know, things like card D and hope that they could draw outs at that point. And I don't know, man, even decks that aren't even just fully spam the board that most people will think of immediately, even decks like Monarchs, if you normal summon Yugioh, you get your Eidos from the great, or you get your Eidos from your deck, okay, flip over summon limit, you cannot tribute summon, you've already used your 2 summons, so you can never advance your game state. And I think that this card could definitely be troublesome for those decks. If your deck relies heavily on the extra deck, I think you're going to find yourself in a problem. Or if you're running a deck that's just used to being able to free flow as many monsters on the field, like a Yugioh, comma 1, comma 2, comma 3, vomit your entire hand all over the field, it's definitely a problem. And the last thing is the important thing that I kind of read but I didn't immediately touch on, the fact that negated summons count towards that limit. That means if your opponent normal summons and you just flip over a Solemn Warning, or you flip over like a Solemn Scolding or a Logia or something like that, use the effect and you negate that that normal summon, that still counts towards their summon limit even though you negated their summon. So they still only get 1 more summon for the turn, and I don't know, man, that seems really good. This card, I think there is a lot of untapped potential. Not right this second, because Zodiac Dryden is just, it's too big of a part of the meta for really Floodgates to be that commanding of a presence outside of things like Anti-Spell Fragrance anyways. But I definitely feel like this card could have a home in the meta, and I just want to know what everybody thinks of it. And by the way, I'm not hyping the card up or anything. Well, actually I kind of am, because I personally believe in this card. If we're going to get something better in Extreme 4s that ends up making this card crappy, okay, yeah, possibly, but I think that this card definitely has a place in the meta, because Yu-Gi-Oh has just become a game that is so much about setting up huge boards and being able to drop a ton of monsters and do a lot of damage quickly, and this card basically says, no motherfucker, you will play slow. And I think the fact that it works on, or summons that are summons that have already been used before this card is activated count towards the limit, I think that is so huge. So you guys let me know what you think. I just wanted to talk about it because I think that this card has a ton of potential. Even things like rank ups, man. Like, what would you do if hypothetically you were playing like a deck maybe like Raid Raptors or Utopia, and you ranked up a couple of times in the turn and your opponent flips this over and it's like, oh god, now I can't even normal summon. That would be, oh, that would just be so bad. And actually, now that I think about it, Zodiac's probably gonna have that same problem too. Imagine that Trident got banned tomorrow, right? That's all Konami did to the deck and nothing else. Most people would probably still play Zodiac, right? But all that ranking up that you do, all of that bullshit with Shaka 9 and Barrage, if you start ranking up, you only get 2 of those, so you might not get a normal summon that turn. And actually, one more major thing that I want to talk about. I thought about it as I was coming up with ideas for the video, but then when I actually went ahead and started shooting it, I totally forgot about it. I think one of the major things that counters this card, Summon Limits, is actually kind of working itself out of the game, and that is the Pendulum Summon mechanic. Obviously, Pendulums could easily work around Summon Limit because they could just go, blah, I'm gonna Pendulum Summon 5 cards from my hand, or I'm gonna Pendulum Summon 5 cards back from my extra deck. That all only counts as 1 summon, despite the fact that I have 5 monsters on the board, and that would be a huge problem for Summon Limit, because usually 5 monsters is enough to kill you. But obviously, with the recent nerfs to Pendulum Summoning, that means that that Pendulum Summon from your extra deck, instead of being 5 monsters, is now just 1. Pendulum Scales have been moved to the Spell and Trap Zone. I mean, you guys all know this stuff. Pendulums have been nerfed so hard that most people aren't really going to be fucking with them that much, and it's like you're taking a whole mechanic that would have kind of pooped on this card, and you're just taking it out of the meta. And Summon Limit has to like that, because that kind of is just being replaced by Link Summoning, which is essentially just blue Synchro Summoning, and that's just another mechanic that gets wrecked by this card, because essentially in an ideal situation you will never be able to actually Link Summon, except if you want like Link 1s. But I mean, what are you really going to do with a Link 1 that's going to threaten your opponent? So I don't know, I actually like this card a lot, and it's still fairly cheap. Don't you guys be like, oh, Cap G actually is sitting on 500 copies of Summon Limit, that's why he made this video. No, No, this card, even despite the fact that it's from GX, which Light of Destruction, what is that, 2008-ish? I mean, it's a very old card, almost a decade old, and it's still only like a $2 card, but definitely a card I wanted to talk about because I don't be shocked if maybe in August or maybe if like late November you actually start seeing people side decking this card, or God forbid the game, you know, becomes so fast, maybe we get a brand new Link archetype that is like hyper fast and people start end up main decking this. So just some food for thought. Wanted to discuss this card. Let me know what you guys thought in the comment section below. Thank you guys for watching as always, and subscribe if you have not already. This video has been brought to you by Audible. Get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at audible.com/MegaCapitalG. Over 180,000 titles to choose from on your mobile device. I'm listening to the amazing I Can't Make This Up by Kevin Hart. Link in the description.